Leo's boots squeaked against the metallic ramp as he stumbled onto the floating terrace, narrowly catching himself from a spectacular faceplant into a puddle of neon-reflective puddles. The flowers, dozens of bouquets, each more ridiculous and over-the-top than the last, tumbled from his arms in a chaotic rainbow, petals scattering like confetti in the artificial breeze. He muttered something about gravity taking a vacation, earning a disapproving beep from a hovering cleaning drone that zoomed past, leaving a tiny trail of glittering dust behind. "Hey, I didn't sign up for an acrobatic floral delivery," he whispered to himself, dragging the last bouquet upright while trying to look casual. Casuality, however, had left the station long ago. The wedding hall sprawled before him like a dream built by someone who clearly loved lasers, crystals, and an unreasonable amount of levitation tech. Tables hovered 3 feet off the floor, guests floated in elaborate gowns, and holographic ribbons twisted through the air in looping arcs, occasionally bumping into a hovering drink tray. Leo's eyes darted across the scene, scanning for the recipient of the flowers, though part of him already knew he didn't want to see them. Not her. He saw her the instant he entered the hall. She froze, and for one slow, impossible heartbeat, time seemed to bend around them. Lyra stood with her back straight, hands clutching a bouquet that wasn't his, her long, translucent ears sweeping back like delicate, impossible wings. Her eyes widened, not in fear exactly, though the look was close, but in recognition, disbelief, and maybe a hint of amusement. Leo felt the ridiculous tightness in his chest that always came when he saw her. Humor was his only armor against emotions, so he pointed at himself and said, "Delivery service, at your, emergency distress call." The bouquet in his hands tilted dangerously, and a stray petal floated into a hovering guest's drink. The guest did not look pleased. "Leo," she said finally, voice like a gentle hum in a lab chamber. The syllable stretched just long enough for him to think that somewhere in the universe, they probably had a law against making human men feel completely outclassed by alien women with perfectly aerodynamic ears. Leo bowed awkwardly, almost tipping over again. Hi, Lyra. Nice, wedding dress thingy." He gestured vaguely at her gown, which shimmered with the kind of subtle luminescence only possible when someone had access to nanomaterials that didn't exist in any Earth catalog. She narrowed her eyes, long ears twitching slightly, a motion that for some reason made his heart skip, and said, "You've improved at embarrassing yourself. Congratulations." They walked toward each other in that strange, slow-motion way people, or people and aliens, do when every step seems like it could ignite a galactic incident. Around them, the wedding continued as normal. A group of children floated by, laughing, wings of anti-gravity boots kicking tiny sparks into the air. An older robot, clearly the kind that had been programmed with sarcasm as a primary function, made a buzzing noise that sounded suspiciously like, finally, someone who belongs in a slapstick routine. Leo ignored it, juggling his awkwardness alongside the flowers, which now seemed to have developed a minor sense of sentience. One of the bouquets quivered and released a cloud of pollen that tickled his nose, prompting a sneeze loud enough to startle a hovering waiter carrying a tray of glowing nectar. "Nice landing," Lyra said dryly. "Really professional." She didn't smile, but the corners of her lips twitched as if resisting it. Leo pointed at himself, mock indignation flaring. "Hey, if by professional you mean gracefully crash into your wedding while spilling multicolored botany all over the guests, then yes, I am the pinnacle of professionalism." She sighed, flicking her ears in a way that was both elegant and mildly threatening. "You always were this dramatic," she said. "I thought it was the zero-gravity dance disaster on Triton that would be your high point." Leo groaned. "You bring that up every time. That was technically heroic." He waved vaguely at the memory, imagining their little adventure on a mining station where his clumsiness had inadvertently saved a reactor from overloading. Lyra's laugh, a brief, melodic sound, floated around him. He realized that even in the midst of a floating wedding, surrounded by curious guests and buzzing drones. He could still hear it perfectly, and it was both infuriating and addictive. As he delivered the first bouquet to a hovering attendant, a small, green-skinned guest with 3 eyes who stared at him like he was a mildly interesting lab specimen, Leo tried to concentrate on the task. Flowers in hand, he muttered jokes under his breath, each pun about petals and spacetime slightly worse than the last, but Lyra's ears twitched in reaction anyway. He felt a little victory surge. Humor had always been a way to reach her, however clumsy. The second bouquet, however, developed what could only be called a personality. A stray nanobot in the petals caused them to wiggle toward a hovering holographic cake, bumping it and sending a small slice floating toward an oblivious guest. Chaos ensued. Guests squealed as glowing cake slid across the air, petals swirled, and Leo attempted to apologize in a mix of broken galactic standard and English. "It's fine, totally under control. Well, mostly under control. Okay, maybe a tiny bit chaotic, but..." He tripped over a small grav field anomaly and landed flat on his back, bouquet skidding across the floor like a defeated warrior. Lyra's eyes glimmered, and for a moment she laughed openly, ears flicking wildly, a sound so unexpected and warm that Leo nearly forgot the floor was still there. "I swear you haven't changed at all," she said, voice soft now, carrying a note of nostalgia. "Except somehow worse." Leo sat up, trying to regain dignity while petals clung to his hair. Worse is a strong word, maybe more experimental. He shrugged, letting a particularly persistent daisy settle onto his shoulder like an ill-tempered companion. Lyra shook her head, still smiling. "You really have a gift for causing mild chaos wherever you go." Leo got to his feet, brushing himself off. "Chaos is just opportunity in disguise," he said, quoting something he wasn't sure he'd ever actually heard. Lyra rolled her eyes, but it was a gesture that held no real annoyance, more amusement, curiosity, and something unspoken between them. They moved through the wedding hall together, the bouquet trail marking a subtle path behind them, petals clinging to floating robes, hovering chairs, and a few nervous robots. In the midst of high-tech grandeur, humming with hovering lights and flickering holodisplays, Leo felt that old, unexplainable connection with Lyra, that spark of past missions, near disasters, and stolen laughter across planets and asteroid belts. By the time he had delivered all the flowers, some guests were genuinely confused, some were laughing, and a few were suspiciously analyzing him for signs of alien contamination. Lyra remained by his side, long ears catching the soft ambient lights, expression unreadable but alive. Leo handed her the last bouquet with a flourish he imagined was heroic, but likely looked like a flailing octopus. She took it, fingers brushing his, and he swore he felt the subtle tingle of shared history ripple through him. "Next time," she said, voice low, "try not to destroy half the hall." Leo grinned, brushing petals from his hair. "No promises." A small drone zipped past, buzzing in what sounded like laughter. Leo whispered to it, "Yes, yes, I'm the Chaos Ambassador. We all get it." Lyra's ears twitched again, and the corners of her lips lifted just slightly. Somewhere between hovering cakes, artificial breeze, and nanobot-animated petals, they had found a brief, fragile moment of equilibrium. Chaos had delivered them back to each other, and for the first time in years, Leo thought that maybe, just maybe, disaster could feel like home. Leo followed Lyra through the wedding hall, trying desperately not to trip over the next grav field anomaly, which had developed a curious habit of moving wherever he stepped. "Seriously, who designs a floor that thinks it's sentient?" he muttered, watching a hovering flower pot inch closer to his foot like a small, floral predator. Lyra's ears twitched at his remark, and she let out a short, amused hum that somehow sounded like music and disapproval at the same time. She kept her hands neatly folded in front of her, the bouquet steady in her grasp, though a few petals from the rogue nanobot flowers in the hall kept drifting toward her. Leo waved them away like a hapless air marshal trying to shoo invisible pests. A group of children zipped past on mini hoverboards, leaving trails of sparkling dust behind them. One of them looped a perfect spin midair, narrowly missing Leo's head, and he instinctively raised his arms to block himself, catching a floating napkin in the process. "I will not be eaten by party debris today," he exclaimed, loud enough that a few nearby guests turned and stared. Lyra raised an eyebrow but didn't correct him. She'd known chaos when she saw it, and Leo, for all his attempts at calm, embodied it perfectly. As they walked, he tried to make small talk. "So, wedding day nerves? Or is it just me bringing the danger factor?" Lyra's ears flicked sideways. "You do realize your arrival has caused 3 hovertray malfunctions, 2 spilled drinks, and a small existential crisis in a bartender robot, right?" Leo scratched his head. "Hey, robots feel things too. Well, not feelings, but awareness. Something like awareness." Lyra gave him a look that suggested she thought he was entirely incapable of rational thought. Leo smiled. "Fine, fine. Chaos Ambassador, guilty as charged." They moved toward the center of the hall, where a small, levitating stage had been set up. Holographic candles floated above the floor in elegant spirals, flickering softly as if mocking Leo's every awkward step. One of them drifted too close, brushing against his shoulder. He jumped back, nearly stepping on a miniature grav field anomaly that had apparently decided it liked him. Lyra's laugh escaped then, soft, like wind chimes in zero gravity. It was brief but enough to make Leo feel like he'd just been granted a small, improbable victory. As they reached a hovering table of refreshments, Leo spotted a plate of glowing spheres that looked dangerously like synthetic fruit. He picked one up, examining it like a scientist attempting to understand alien biology without a manual. "Do I eat it? Do I feed it to a passing drone? Do I experiment?" He glanced at Lyra, who shook her head, the corners of her lips twitching in amusement. "Try not to start a culinary catastrophe," she said. "Trust me, the last time you experimented with food on a zero-G station, we had to evacuate half the dining module." Leo frowned. "Evacuate? That sounds dramatic. I prefer flavor-testing adventures." Lyra's ears twitched in irritation or amusement. He couldn't tell which. Then came the small disaster everyone would remember. The bouquet of daisies he had delivered earlier started vibrating, buzzing faintly, and before Leo could react, it floated toward the cake, which was already hovering unsteadily above the stage. Guests squealed, and a slice of cake detached itself midair, spinning lazily toward an unsuspecting waiter robot. Leo lunged to catch it, misjudged the trajectory, and ended up entangled with a floating ribbon, looking like some kind of interstellar piñata. Lyra's laughter echoed through the hall, melodic and unrestrained, as she reached out and flicked the ribbon away with a graceful twist of her hand. Her long ears caught the light as she moved, like subtle waves in a soft current, and Leo thought that if chaos was art, she was its curator. The small incidents drew them into a quieter corner, behind a holographic display that projected a slowly rotating galaxy. The gentle hum of the projectors masked the distant noise of the wedding chaos, and Leo finally dared to breathe. "You remember that mission on Triton, right? When the gravity malfunctioned and I saved us by accidentally pressing all the wrong buttons." Lyra's smile softened, nostalgia flickering in her eyes. "I do. It was reckless, impressive, and completely idiotic." She flicked her ears in a subtle gesture that somehow felt like a compliment. Leo grinned. "Idiotic heroics, then, my specialty." They exchanged stories quietly, leaning close enough that a stray nanobot from one of the bouquets brushed against Leo's hair. The memory of shared adventures spilled out naturally. Near-death escapes from rogue mining drones, zero-gravity dance-offs that ended in hilarity, and the countless times they had laughed in impossible situations. Lyra's eyes twinkled as she recounted one particularly ridiculous incident involving an alien governor, a broken translator, and a bowl of synthetic soup. Leo responded with equally exaggerated stories, pretending he had heroically prevented an asteroid from colliding with a spaceport, when in reality, he'd only tripped over a grav field anomaly and accidentally nudged the asteroid onto a safe course. The humor kept the tension from crushing them, though under it, something unspoken lingered. The weight of their shared history, the unacknowledged attraction, the fleeting moments they'd almost shared but never quite reached. A small hover drone buzzed by, stopping in midair to observe them with what Leo assumed was judgment. Yes, yes, we're having a meaningful conversation. Move along, you snoop, he muttered, waving a hand at the drone, which ignored him entirely. Lyra's ears twitched in laughter, but she said nothing, letting him maintain his dignity, or what was left of it. Time slipped by in this small bubble. The wedding raged on outside, with floating cakes, errant bouquets, and guests trying to navigate an increasingly chaotic hall. Leo and Lyra, however, existed in the shared orbit of memories and jokes, slipping between past and present with ease. Lyra's hand brushed against his as she adjusted a wayward petal in one of the bouquets, and Leo felt a spark, subtle but undeniable, run through him. "Careful," he whispered, not really about the bouquet. "I might start thinking you're flirting with me." Lyra flicked her ears at him, an arch expression crossing her face. "You've been thinking that for years," she said. Leo feigned shock, clutching his chest. "Scandalous. And here I thought this wedding was my day to shine." Lyra's laughter drifted softly, filling the small corner with warmth that the chaos outside could not touch. For a moment, the floating ribbons, buzzing drones, and hovering cakes all faded into background noise, and the universe shrank down to them, precarious and fragile, yet entirely alive. As the toast began elsewhere in the hall, signaling the next round of ceremonial chaos, Leo knew their fragile reprieve was ending. Yet he also knew something crucial. In a galaxy built of floating debris, unpredictable anomalies, and improbable coincidences, humor and shared memories could serve as their gravity. Chaos might follow them everywhere, but it would always be tempered by laughter, and maybe, just maybe, by the slow pull of something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. The final toast had begun, and the hall buzzed with hovering glasses and the soft hum of celebration drones, each programmed to detect and amplify joy. Leo navigated the floating tables with caution, stepping over grav field anomalies and glancing nervously at the hovering cakes, which still bore the faint marks of his earlier mishaps. Lyra walked beside him, ears twitching subtly as she kept her balance with effortless grace. He tried not to trip over his own feet, but as usual, chaos seemed determined to follow him. A small bouquet from the back of the hall floated toward his shoulder like a curious cat, and he waved it off with mock exasperation. "Honestly, at this point, I think the flowers are conspiring against me," he muttered. Lyra's lips quirked in amusement, and for a moment the universe shrank down to the two of them amidst swirling petals and holographic lights. The wedding's host, a dignified alien in flowing ceremonial robes, raised a glowing goblet, calling for silence. The guests hovered attentively, some sipping luminescent drinks, others swaying gently in anti-gravity choreography. Leo, trying to blend in with minimal dignity, accidentally nudged a grav field anomaly with his boot, sending a floating platter of glowing desserts spinning like a comet. "See, I bring the cosmos with me," he whispered under his breath. Lyra's ears twitched again, and she gave him a sharp look that conveyed both exasperation and delight. He grinned sheepishly. The host's speech began, praising the unity of cultures, the merging of traditions, and the courage to love across differences. Leo's mind wandered back to his first encounter with Lyra years ago, on a mining outpost orbiting a dying star. Back then, he had been reckless, impulsive, and all too aware of how little control he had over the chaos surrounding him. Lyra had been equally daring, commanding respect effortlessly, yet hiding her own uncertainty beneath elegance and humor. He had admired her from a distance, then beside her on daring missions, always fumbling when it came to expressing anything real. Now, standing beside her at her wedding, his flowers still intact, barely, He felt the weight of growth. He had learned to navigate chaos, to balance humor with sincerity, and most importantly, to recognize the subtle gravity of someone else's presence without letting panic dictate his actions. A sudden mishap broke his reverie. One of the larger floating cakes wobbled dangerously, slicing through a ribbon display and sending sparks of holographic light scattering across the hall. Gasps rose, followed by laughter as the cake tilted further, threatening a collision with a hovering drink tray. Leo reacted instinctively, diving toward the tray, colliding gently with Lyra. Both of them rolled in a surprisingly coordinated mess, laughing as they righted themselves. Lyra's long ears flicked in amusement, and Leo felt a pang of recognition, the same rush they had shared on countless missions, when survival demanded teamwork, trust, and a sense of humor. "Honestly, you're impossible," Lyra said, brushing a stray petal from her shoulder. "And yet, I suppose I should thank you. You've made this one unforgettable." Leo bowed dramatically, a mock flourish, though he felt genuine warmth in her words. "Unforgettable, yes. Mostly because I survived being your chaotic sidekick without serious injury. That counts as heroism, right?" She rolled her eyes, but the faintest smile tugged at her lips, and he knew she appreciated the gesture more than she admitted. As the ceremony drew to a close, the guests floated toward the exit terraces, releasing luminescent lanterns that shimmered against the dark expanse of the city below. Leo and Lyra lingered, the hall's noise fading into a soft hum, replaced by the quiet of suspended petals and distant starlight. He handed her the last bouquet, the one that had survived the day's mayhem. Their fingers brushed briefly, and he felt the weight of everything left unsaid, the missions, the laughter, the small misadventures that had always brought them together and then pushed them apart. "I guess this is goodbye for now," Leo said softly, though he knew the universe had a way of conspiring to keep certain people in orbit together. Lyra tilted her head, ears catching the light like delicate sails. "For now," she agreed, her tone teasing yet tinged with sincerity. "But you should know you make chaos seem worthwhile." Leo laughed, the sound echoing softly, mingling with the hum of drones and the twinkling of hovering lanterns. "I'll take that as a compliment and a warning." A playful drone zipped past, buzzing in what sounded like approval, and Leo waved at it. "Yes, yes, I'm still the Chaos Ambassador," he said. Lyra's laughter floated with him, a musical counterpoint to the soft hum of the city below. He realized then that growth was not about avoiding mistakes or disasters. It was about facing them, learning to laugh in the midst of them, and finding someone who could navigate the turbulence beside you. They stepped out onto the terrace together, the city lights reflecting off the floating crystals and the occasional streak of passing hover traffic. Leo's hand brushed hers once more, lingering slightly, and he felt the subtle tug of shared history, old adventures, and unspoken possibilities. For the first time in years, he felt fully present, balanced between chaos and calm, humor and sincerity, past and future. The floating lanterns rose higher, drifting toward the stars, carrying the laughter, the chaos, and the quiet moments of connection into the night. Leo took a deep breath, smiling at the improbable sequence of events that had brought him here, to this terrace, beside Lyra, with the remnants of scattered bouquets around their feet. The universe still spun unpredictably, still full of accidents, miscalculations, and rogue nanobots. Yet in that moment, he understood something vital. Life was a series of chaotic collisions, and sometimes the most meaningful ones were the ones you didn't plan. He looked at Lyra, long ears catching the starlight, expression soft and alive. "Next time maybe we should meet somewhere less hazardous," he suggested, teasing but sincere. She laughed, brushing a floating petal from his shoulder. "Next time, I think I'd like that." And as they watched the lanterns drift into the void, Leo felt a quiet satisfaction settle in his chest. The chaos of the day, the humor, the near disasters, and the memories had all led to this, a moment of balance, laughter, and connection. He had grown, learned, and survived not because he had controlled everything, but because he had embraced the chaos,